Before I started my entrepreneurial journey, my mentor asked me a very critical question that changed the course of my thought process. He asked me, he told me that there are three kinds of people in the world. One are the guys who will see the problems around them and will never do anything about them. He categorized them as tourists. Second, he told, they are guys who will see people around them, he'll visualize them, they'll visualize them in the most fascinating ways and highlight them, but would want someone else to solve that problem. He categorized them, not literally, but as journalists of life. And third are the guys who see the problem around them and would go on to solve those problems. He told me that, Taran, which of these categories would you like to be in? And without even giving a thought, I told him that, sir, I would like to be the problem solver and would never focus my energy on criticizing about the problems rather than solving the problem. Very good evening. My name is Taranpreet Singh. I've started my journey as a technology entrepreneur and currently have invested in a couple of companies in India and US as well with an 8-figure portfolio. I had a chance to give guest lectures mostly on technology, entrepreneurship, venture capital, wealth creation at different institutions across the world like IITs, IIMs and big universities. But then the entrepreneurial journey has not been a linear graph. I was not descended upon with a second generation, wealth. I've always been a first generation entrepreneur. When I started, I still remember the first company, it took us like 1 year to go from 0 to 10,000 users. And one fine day, one of the co-founders took away all the intellectual property. And we literally had no clue because we didn't even understood about the legal contracts at that point of time. That was the first learning, you need to have things in black and white. I still remember the second case, when with all the hope, we started again and built a solar electric vehicle and then went on to build autonomous vehicles in India and US. But then over a period of time, we realized that's a very capital intensive business. And what you could do then just moving along, and after some time again we realized that we were not able to raise funds and then thought of moving on. Couple of these failed attempts, I went on to join corporate and was consulting CXOs of large companies, then went on to be the chief growth officer of a $100 million pharma group. And one fine day, my breakthrough was I started doing what I did the best. I was into consulting and investment banking. And one of the clients came back to me and told that, Taran, I'll give you $500 an hour. Help me with this particular stuff. And that was the first breakthrough where I had the massive active income, and then I diversified my assets and invested into different companies, asset classes, etc., to create passive income as well as the capital gains. If we talk about today, I was recently felicitated by the Home Minister of India, Minister of State, featured in 30 Under 30. Recently, the biography was published in Eminent SIIC Personalities, and very recently, 3 weeks back, was featured as Technology Entrepreneur of the Year by World SIIC Chamber of Commerce. Today, I'll be talking about, why you should pursue technology entrepreneurship, and why, as a first generation entrepreneur, I think technology entrepreneurship is one of the best asset classes to go for rather than the other asset classes. One of the common denominators in all my companies is technology. And let me tell you that I think technology creates an unfair advantage for you to scale, to build that defensibility, and you can have not just 10 to 12% or 15% IRR, or you could literally have start from $1,000, $2,000 and can exit in a couple of millions of dollars. And I think that's something which fascinates me as an entrepreneur, and I keep on sharing this with all the youth, all the ones who are starting, maybe the students, or even in the late stages of their lives. If you look at the opportunity, right, there are close to 8 billion people in the world. Imagine 5 billion people are the unique users on the mobile phones, right? Case in point could be, you could have a coffee shop, or you could have, let's say, a mattress shop in a particular geography catering to 5 square kilometers, or let's say 100,000 users, right? You go online, suddenly the total addressable market or the market size increases to, let's say, 10 million or 20 million or 100 million users, right? How great is this opportunity? Now, earlier if you were to open different shops, you would have incremental expenses, but then again incremental revenues. But now, as you sell online, or if you create a software, you would have incremental expenses and exponential revenues. And that is an unfair advantage which none of these other entrepreneurial, I think, verticals that give you. Again, for an example, if you look at the different companies that have scaled very rapidly, I like to give an example of Google or Facebook or Yahoo for an example. Look at the graphs. The revenue, which was maybe $200,000 in the first year of operations, went to a couple of $1 billion in the 5th year of operations, right? And if I ask you what kind of business, if you're running an offline business or if you're running a brick and mortar store, would you be able to do it? And probably the 95% of you might say no, unless and until you license the intellectual property and compound the brand and so on and so forth, right? And what really happens is, when you create such a high growth business with such a scalability, right, then the venture capital also flows in. That's a great opportunity for all the aspiring entrepreneurs out here, right? I think this is one of the best times, not just in India, but across the world to start a business, because earlier, you used to maybe go for debt or raise from family or friends, and there were no structured financial instruments to support you. Now, if you're looking to start a business in India, the government with the grants and fellowships give you $50,000, or let's say $100,000 if you're in biotechnology. If you're in other parts of the world, if it's in Singapore, the government gives you $50,000, or every country in the EU has different startup policies, and so on and so forth. Then I think the VCs have more than billions of dollars assets under management and billions of dollars in dry powder, which they're looking to invest in companies to have that sizable returns. So I think this is the best time to go and start your venture, especially in technology. And if you look at, I showed you this graph of the Facebook, Google, and different high growth companies which have really scaled well, right? What happens is, if you're scaling with incremental revenues and incremental expenses, then you would not be able to get that multiple for the valuations. But when you look at the high growth companies, you look at these multiples. If you're growing 10% yearly, you'd get 1x or 2x multiple on the gross sales or the gross revenues. But then if you're growing 200%, 300%, then the multiples completely change. Which of the other businesses give you this privilege? Now, again, when I was talking about the venture capital space, I think it's very important to understand, what is that the VCs are looking for. What is, there's a lot of hype around unicorns and etc., right? One of the things is you have to understand that VCs are also like entrepreneurs. They're managing the funds. They have a certain IRR to target, right? And they're investing in startups as an asset class. And they're always looking for the startups which would go really big. Most of the VCs, I think, they have something portfolio like this. One of the startups go on to have massive returns, which helps them meet their returns, and which they could return to the LPs, right? And hence, if you go on to build that scalable startups, right, you'll always be, attracting all these venture capital, not just in India, but across the geographies. That's why it said, it's hard, it's easy to start it's easy to solve a hard problem today than solving a easy problem today, right? And one of the other things that I would like to share here is, this is again data points from India. If you look at the HNIs data or the millennials data, 64% of the millennials or the HNIs are the business owners, right? And some of them are self-employed, and then just 10-12% are the salaried professionals. Which means if you are here to create wealth, right, and create generational wealth, you have to look at businesses as an asset class, and you have to there's higher probability that you'll end up being an HNI over the course of years, right? if you tend to start a business rather than investing in other asset classes, especially in India. Even across the world, the trend is similar, where it's 38% in they are entrepreneurs and technology entrepreneurs, right, and then some other asset classes. Now, one of the very interesting things, is that 88% of the millionaires out there globally are the self-made millionaires, right? I think it should be a very, very compelling story that we could tell ourselves, right? Not just in the room, but everybody who's listening this, right? That you have a chance, you have a fair chance, right, to be a multimillionaire in your lives, right? And I think everybody is trying to do best for their families, to do best. But again, it's about what you are selling, whom you are selling, right? And if you're selling in a right way with the right strategy, then you could definitely be a millionaire. But the important thing is you have to reverse engineer what's worked for the world. Now, if you look at across the world, look at the US or the West, right? The top 10 technology entrepreneurs hold close to $1 trillion of wealth, right? And even in India, 1/3 of the billionaires have technology in as one of the core verticals of the business, and this trend is going to increase. Look at the public markets in the US, where it's very much driven with technology, and this is how the things would change in India, even the Asia Pacific region, which is changing very fast. Not just in India, you look at the Indonesia, you look at the Asia Pacific market, right? And this trend is evolving, and you'll see because of the scalability and the defensibility, and you could reach millions of people which you were unable to reach before. You would solve millions of things at a scale which the economics wouldn't have been possible if you were to solve in a traditional ways. So I have a framework which I think could be used for most of you who are looking to create wealth and sustainable wealth over a period of time. I think you would need a very high income skill, right? And this is the trend that I've observed meeting with a lot of millionaires, multimillionaires. One of my partners is close to a billionaire, and I think one of the important things is it's a very high income skill where you create the active income, and then you go on to diversify that active income into different asset classes, right? This could be real estate. This could be let's say you invest in different companies, you're having dividends or passive income from that, right? And then you will be able to create a sizable amount of recurring wealth in the form of passive income. But then you should also go on for mixing your portfolio of of your funds, of your active or passive income, to go and invest in capital gains, right? The earlier you start, the better it is, right? Because capital gains is something where you buy at an undervalued price. This could be a real estate, this could be a share, right? And then you go on to sell it at a very higher price. And this is very true, even for the angel investors, even for the VCs, even for the real estates who flip properties, etc., right? And one of the very important things, the last, which I think which is beyond science, that I've observed personally in my life, is all the ones who have reached at the top after a certain period of time, once your cash flows are sorted and active income and passive income is sorted, right? One of the trends that I've observed is the people give back, right? I personally have pledged to contribute 10% of my wealth for charity, and I'll continue to do till my life ends, till my life lasts. And I always suggest that people ask me what is the best financial instrument. I always tell them you go and create value for the others, right? And that's something which is very, very important. Just summarizing the learnings, I think when I was in corporate, I was a chief growth officer of a pharma group, very comfortable in corporate life. It takes a lot of courage to start, but let me tell you, it's worth it, right? And I think anything that's worth it takes that courage. If you need to fly, you need to jump off the cliff, right? But then and another lesson that I learned is the perseverance and resilience. Once you start, you'll face many obstacles in your life, right? And there'll be especially in entrepreneurship or technology entrepreneurship, where there are a lot of different variables, right? You cannot even imagine your co-founder messes up, or let's say there's COVID that's coming in, or who could have imagined a COVID that occurs once in a pandemic, occurs once in like 100 years, right? And a lot of businesses were shut down, right? So you need to again factor those uncertainties, right? You need to evolve according to those uncertainties, and you need to, which it doesn't really mean that you shut down, but again, you can pivot to something which solves or hedges the risk for that short-term uncertainty that's coming in, right? And over the period of time, I think the most important thing what I've learned in my life is, you've not reached yet, right? I've seen people who are at almost $1 billion assets under management, right? They've not reached it. They're learning. They're unlearning, especially, and they're continuously relearning, right? And I'll say that enjoy your journey whenever you're pursuing something. After a couple of years, you'll have your the financials sorted, right? It takes 1, 2, 3 years, right? But after that's sorted, when you look back, you'll be able to connect the dots looking backwards, and then you'll be like, oh, I have a story to tell. And then the most important thing is, during those 1, 2, or 3 years, right? Were you enjoying the journey, right? And even I found my first breakthrough in something which I enjoyed doing the most. I was looking outside, but I think it's all inside, right? And I think that's something which I wanted to share to the world, to share with all of you. I think this asset class, the technology entrepreneurship, is something which will create a lot of millionaires in not just in India but across the world, right? Ride the uptrend, right? And maybe 15 years down the lane, 20 years down the lane, when you'll play this talk again, right? Maybe you'll realize my words were good. Thank you.